All right, and so we're back for part 2. Got a big main event to discuss, so we'll just get right into it. Fatal 5-Way.
This main event, by the way, is for NXT in your house.
Yeah. And
for folks tuning into episode 2. I don't know how many people do that, but let them know that's the event we're talking about. It's Jack. It's Mr. Solis. And get this, Jack. You and I, 2 months ago, we pontificated on the future of the NXT Heavyweight Championship. We thought about who's going to win between Cross and Balor, right? Mm-hmm. And then we said, gosh, who's going to challenge him next? Could it be O'Reilly? Could it be Dunn? Could it be Adam Cole? Could it be Gargano? Neither of us, Jack, had the brilliant idea to say all of them.
Yeah. And, they really played up as we'll see what we see at the end. Throughout the short build of this match, they really played up this whole chaos factor where things were getting so out of control that's why Cross called for all of them, because essentially his whole thing was wanting to put each single man in their place for testing him.
And it's like, it's funny? Cross is awkward to me. He's a little cringy. And this was one of those moments where I was really behind him. I'm like, yes, please. Be a dominant champion and say, I'll take them all on at once. I'll tell you more about his cringe factor as we get into the match. But wait, Jack, what's that happening behind the Tron?
Behind the Tron.
As Gargano makes his entrance, as his music begins to play.
I don't think I know.
We have another fight. We have another backstage fight.
Yes, that's right. We see Raquel and Dakota trying to get into it with Ember and Shotzi.
And having to be separated by hapless, stagehands and poor William Regal, who's at his wit's end.
Yeah. And shout out to The Way. Gargano comes out in an attire essentially paying homage to Shawn Michaels. And as you saw from the photos online, Austin Theory was essentially dressed as Diesel for him.
And the women were dressed as Razor Ramon.
Yeah. But so
I don't know, man. If Gargano was doing all the comic book references and Star Wars references, now that he's referencing wrestling is referencing wrestling itself, I think the world's going to implode. I think we're going to cease to exist. We've reached the end of the universe and we're staring into an abyss, and it's us.
Yeah. And so Gargano comes out, O'Reilly comes out, Dunn comes out, we see Cole come out, finally get Cross. And I thought when Cross made entrance, I thought they were going to do the spot where he just waited in the very middle of that ring, and once the bell rang, all 4 men just started going after him.
Yes.
But I liked the way it went, where, he kind of waited around for someone to come challenge him first, as the other 4 men went after each other. And I really liked it. It reminded me of I think it was at Extreme Rules or Battleground when back in 2016 when they had a Fatal 4-Way for the IC title, and out the gate Zayn went and hit Kevin Owens with a haluva kick to kind of play off their history. Very similar here. As soon as that bell rings, they kind of look at each other, and O'Reilly immediately goes after Cole, playing up from their match that happened at Stand and Deliver.
Agreed.
You're showing that continuity there.
Nice continuity. Mm-hmm.
But so overall, just the entire match, it was completely fast paced. A lot of people thought it was going to be messy having that many people in the ring, but I thought not only did they keep it fast paced, but they did it so well that things weren't so convoluted and messy throughout the entirety of it.
I don't know if I'd say it was fast paced, but everyone got their stuff in.
Yeah.
And Karrion Kross, it looked like in the beginning when he was taking on each comer, right? It went from taking on all comers to taking on each comer. So now they're kind of like Bruce Lee villains, one at a time. Mm. It looked like he was trying to show a versatility in his style. I'll fight Kyle O'Reilly the way he fights. I'll fight the bruiserweight, the way he fights, that was a little trite. Each of those moments ends in a suplex.
Yeah.
I did like that part. That each of them are disposed, I think, even with a different suplex. That was a versatility I didn't mind.
Yeah. And playing up how he like was adapting to their style, I think like each suplex he hit was kind of similar to like the type of style that you usually see with each wrestler's like different style. Like I think he hit O'Reilly with a German, which is very like striker-esque and and technician-esque of like Dunn and O'Reilly. Whereas Gargano's, it was almost like one of those like effortless ones because of how light Gargano is, and then Cole was like, I forget what type of suplex he hit Cole with, but yeah, he was like trying to change it up a lot.
Yeah, that I liked. I called him cringy earlier. He says things that I just think aren't becoming of a guy his size. And you know what? In this match, he looked so big compared to everyone else. But he does little things that I wished he'd stop. Like imagine, Jack, him giving that come hither finger, you know what I mean? Like, come here.
Yeah.
Here, you know what I mean? Like, it's so, I don't know. Thanos wouldn't do the come here finger. Lesnar wouldn't do the come here finger. You're supposed to, like, remember in Endgame when Thanos just put his sword in the ground and his helmet on the sword and he just sat? He just sat, Jack. He sat and he waited for them to come to him. I mean, if you're not going to do that, then just run into the guy. This weird tease. It's like, you're a grown man.
And I'm trying to remember what match it was, but there was a spot where in one of the previous matches, I thought someone was going through that like window display at the start, but then when they like avoided, I think it was when Shotzi was taking care of Dakota, where she just threw her into the plants instead. I looked at my dad and I was like, they're probably saving that then for the 5-way match. Well, I was close because you get, I believe it's Gargano, Dunn, and Cross fighting on the stage. And then instead of going through that window, Cross goes straight through that door that's set up and
blows the door right off the hinges.
Yeah. And, when I saw that spot, I was like, okay, if we're getting towards the end of the match, we're probably going to see something similar to Lashley at Backlash, where he comes back at the very end. But I think that was the crazy thing about this match, was there was so many spots where you thought it was going to be the finish, and it just kept going and going.
Another big Cross win for me was when he came back and he started again, suplexing them guys over the barricade on top of each other.
Yeah.
Cole, Riley, I think Dunn was next.
And then he catches Gargano in the dive.
Right. Oh, yes. Please, more of that.
Yeah. And then, to kind of play up that they're trying to take out Cross the most, there's a spot where he's on the apron and O'Reilly and Cole look at each other and they're like, you know what? Let's put our differences aside real quick. They take him and they go to powerbomb him onto the table. I say onto.
They powerbomb him onto
I say
the
onto.
Table, and it
doesn't break.
Good use of prepositions, Jack. Yes, it looked real bad.
Yeah. And I decided to joke around with this because as soon as I saw that, I looked at my dad and said, this just proves that Dunn isn't the baddest person in NXT, because if they aren't able to get Cross through that table, but yet Toni Storm can come in with one hand, I think it proves she's the baddest person in the NXT locker room.
That's a good one. Jack, before we go any further, this match had 5 competitors, and I thought if for some reason you're going to take the belts off Cross, what better way to do it than a match where anybody could be pinned? And I thought, okay, he looks strong. They make a quick change because, maybe knee-jerk reaction. Who did you think was going to win before this match started?
So, I actually thought Cross was going to retain. Just because I was like, even if, as I mentioned in the previous episode, even if there's like hints of fans turning on him, and there's supposed like hints of maybe, I don't know where people got this idea from, but there was people saying that there was hints that they wanted Cross on the main roster, that he might be heading up to the main roster, maybe come draft time.
Yeah.
But like, I was like, okay, if you want to do that, then I can see you taking the belt off of him now, especially because of the fact that short title reigns aren't necessarily a new thing, as we saw last year with Keith Lee. He had just won the belt in a big fashion, and as soon after he was getting called up, so they had to have him drop the belt soon. I was like, if they want to do something similar to that, they could. And if they were to do it, I was like, okay, if they're going to do that, I would say put the belt on either Dunn or Cole. As much as I want O'Reilly to get it, I was like, O'Reilly is one that you build up towards. Whereas Dunn or Cole, it would somewhat make sense if you would just put the belt back on them.
Look, each of them former champions, right? You had, NXT, longest reigning NXT champion in Cole, and longest reigning NXT UK champion. Has Walter beaten him yet? He has, hasn't he?
Yeah. Walter's at 800 days now, I think.
Right. Asterisk. But I got you. We've mentioned over O'Reilly. He needs more build. That man is Captain Cringe. I think he should roll with that. I think that should be a shirt, Captain Cringe, the way everything he says and does. I hate him. And did you hear the crowd, Jack? The crowd hate him too.
Yeah.
They're booing him and yaying at him, Cole. Baby.
Yeah. Very, very much playing off of what I was saying, how... and this is the good thing about crowds coming back, is now we can finally know, who's getting cheered for and who's not, rather than just assuming.
But at the Capitol Wrestling Center, it's a manufactured WWE arena, was booing Kyle O'Reilly.
Yeah, and in previous weeks we saw MSK getting booed by them.
Yes, they were really behind Legado del Fantasma earlier in the night. It was crazy.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, with the whole thing about fans maybe voicing displeasure, we were seeing a lot of booing for Cross, or even just dead silence for a lot of his spots as well.
Yes. Not enough suplexes. He does like that judo. I can spar with you. Just hit him. Just hit him real hard.
And speaking of getting crowd reaction, you could say it was definitely very tough back at I forgot what Takeover took place at, when Cole hits Ricochet with an upside down super kick, but now to have two people have to time it, with Gargano and Cole having to catch Pete Dunne while he's upside down with double super kicks. That spot was insane to me.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and get towards the finish of the match, I really liked the story that commentary played up a lot with the finish, which was, O'Reilly has Cole in a submission, and that's when Cross comes in from behind him and gets him in essentially the cross jacket. And they were saying, the commentary played it up, if O'Reilly had put aside his hatred for Cole, he could have let him go and maybe fought out of it better. But because of that hatred between the two, he keeps it on longer than he should have, to the point where it's enough that he slowly gets choked out by Cross, passes out, and lets Cross retain that title.
Yeah, I definitely like that spin on that logic. Logical things are logical. You know what I mean? That was really good.
Yeah. Very good match. O'Reilly's expressions at that very end, especially selling that cross jacket, was just crazy. So Cross is retained. Pretty good match.
Cross retains. For a night, Jack, with 3 championship matches that saw no title changes, I was thoroughly entertained. We've seen nights like this, Jack, where nothing changes and you think, well, what was the point of that? But I did not feel the same way at NXT in your house.
Yeah. And honestly, comparing the two, it was kind of tough, the previous year and this one, because that's what a lot of people were doing. And I don't think I can choose one necessarily, because both had such, good moments. They both had their own moments. And speaking of, how I mentioned in the last episode, In Your House is a return from when they did it for the first time last year. I forgot to mention, before this match, we also got shown a commercial showing that the Great American Bash is coming back. TV special for NXT. But so,
hey, 1 week, not 2 weeks, like last week here, Jack.
Yeah.
You know why?
Why?
Because they're on Tuesdays now, and they don't need to counter-program against anybody else.
Yeah. Very good benefit of them moving to Tuesdays is they can solely focus on themselves again. But, so, easily a good match. I thought it was match of the night. Really good. And that's the end, right, sir?
Nope. There's more. You know, it's an emotional roller coaster the whole night of matches. And just when I think it is done and I'm ready to sort of move on with my day, we haven't gotten the copyright thing, have we yet?
No. And that was the thing, was the way they were stretching out that post-match like thing of Cross.
Yes.
There was hope in me that someone was coming out to set up something. You know, there was hope in me that that's why they were stretching out. But then I'm like, wait, where's the copyright logo at? Where's everything at?
The copyright information on the bottom left of the screen indicating the night is over. The taping is done. We are gonna move on to that screen on Peacock that says your event has ended. But we cut to the back. We're outside in the parking lot where, I wish I knew her name better. Is it Sarah?
I think I don't know her first name. I think her last name is Mackenzie or something. Or that might be her first name. One of the two.
Oh, we're bad reporters. But she's approaching William Regal, who's walking away from her, wanting to know about the fracas of the whole night. We saw no less than 3 fights break out in the parking lot, in the locker room area, and even as close as the gorilla position behind the Tron. And William Regal turns around to face her, tears streaming from his eyes. And in a quiet, defeated tone, he says, he tells us that he's been the general manager of NXT for something close to 7 years, and that there may be a need for a change.
Yeah. And like the moment it happened, I was just thinking, no, you can't have Regal step down as GM, or you can't even have him retire. He as much as Gargano and Zayn, as much as I love Zayn and stuff, as much as they want to argue that they're the heart and soul of NXT, you can make that argument that Regal being their GM truly was the heart and soul of NXT all these years.
Anybody who has watched a TV show for an extended amount of time and has suffered the loss of a character that affected them, like, to an unnatural degree, understands what you and I are going through. The idea of Regal leaving the show in his authoritative role is upsetting. Oh, that's good storytelling.
Yeah. Especially because, to me, it's like, throughout all the authoritative figures we've seen, I've always thought Regal was the best, solely because he wasn't constantly being shoved in your face on TV all the time. Regal... No,
and he didn't throw his weight around. You know, he didn't hold grudges against his employees like we've seen done to death since the late 90s.
Yeah, you know, his thing was always, I'm here if you need a good promo. I'm here to set up matches, and I'm here to come out on rare occasions when things need to be settled, you know, to announce certain matches. Most notably, to a lot of NXT fans, is War Games. The thought of having a War Games event this year without Regal being there to say War Games just hurts me. If that's the way they want to go.
With the potential future of a Regal-less NXT, Jack, I wonder, who do you think takes his place?
So, here's what I want. Like a day or two before this event happens, on the Saturday or Friday, we hear rumors that Samoa Joe was at the Performance Center, and that WWE NXT is thinking of bringing him back in a variety of roles. And immediately when people hear that and they see the thing at the end with Regal, they immediately think Regal stepping down, Joe comes in and takes over. What I want is for Regal to, I was telling me that, what I wanted Regal to show up this Tuesday and kind of cut, like I said, you can rely on Regal to cut a good promo. Have him go out there and say, I've let things run rampant for too long, get out of control for too long. It's about time I bring in some reinforcement, and that's when you bring in Samoa Joe as his enforcer rather than him just being GM. You bring him in as that enforcer.
So, stop fighting or I'll beat you up. Act right or suffer the consequences.
Yeah. That's kind of what my thinking was with it, because it's like because you can't help but want to see Joe in an active role, like an active competitor's role. Yeah.
But Jack, that's you as the fan ruining the product for yourself. Stop trying to figure out where this is going to go. Just enjoy the ride. Just watch the show, Jack. If you don't like it, stop watching.
Yeah. So, for those who don't know, Mr. Solis is hinting at a media call that Triple H had where, they were asking him a lot about, NXT's fans and, like, just fans in general, and when they're, like, having opinions on things. And essentially, Triple H told them, hey, you guys are kind of at fault for trying to think ahead, and if you're not liking the current product, well, then just stop watching.
Yeah, for real. It was poor form for Triple H, who's probably suffering a lot of frustrations that come with the job. You know what I mean? He sounded a lot like Vince in his responses to what some perceived were softball questions about NXT and the current state of the show. But you and I, at the end of last episode, were talking about, to what extent do fans ruin their ability to enjoy these shows with letting their imaginations run wild? If the show doesn't meet the expectations you've created in your own mind, is it the fault of the show?
Yeah, and I think where you can best see that is like, for example, the Royal Rumble. People have allowed themselves to believe so many like rumors that come out during that time, or talk themselves into thinking that certain people are returning, debuting.
And it's not unique to wrestling. You've seen it constantly over the last decade of people, saying that The Sopranos or Dexter or Breaking Bad, they ended on a whimper. Or they ended on a sour note, or they didn't go in a direction that the fans themselves had kind of the headcanon that they created. So many shows, they just sort of take a creative turn that makes their fans. Game of Thrones Season 8 in its entirety. People want to petition to get that eradicated from known history. Mulligan it.
Yeah, it's funny you bring it up. I can bring up an example that I know recently. And that's in anime and manga. The popular series Attack on Titan recently finished, and when the author came out with its final chapter, there was people who enjoyed it, but there was so many people who were expecting so much different things, and when it wasn't that, they got frustrated, they got annoyed, they were complaining about the finish, saying that it needed to be rewritten, that when they adapted it to the manga to anime, the finish should be changed. So much so that the author himself, he said, he felt he didn't explain things well enough, and so that he was going to add an extra 8 panels to it, like to kind of explain things further. He added them on, and even further, fans were not happy, and it was like, you guys forced them to do this, and now you're even more unhappy with what you forced them to do.
Yeah.
And that's why... That's why I'm kind of happy, or I'm hoping that despite unhappiness from fans, NXT doesn't try and change too much. Because as much as fans were voicing displeasure for Cross and stuff, I hope they don't allow that to like force them to change their hand, because sometimes it can't go as well.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because what should dictate those changes? You know, and it's hard not to answer that without the fans, right? Like, the fans know what they like. Vince McMahon, I think, created a model where it was definitely grounded in the idea of the fans will like what I tell them to like. You know? I think we've seen that happen over the course of WWE's history, successfully and unsuccessfully. And there's like this real headstrong, there's real pig-headedness about, no, stick to it. There's like, it's funny, because on one side of the argument, you're like, no, stick to it, be consistent, have conviction about these decisions. And then there's another side where, no, be flexible, you know, be willing to change your plans. And, you know, are fans rooting for themselves to an extent? To another extent, NXT's quality hardly compares to what it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, you know, there's some cases where it works out. Like, the biggest case you can say it worked out was Daniel Bryan's push to the top back in like 2014, when the fans kind of just rebelled and said, no, we're not going to cheer for the guys you want us to cheer for. We're not going to get invested in the story you want. We have our guy that we want to see. And it worked out, you know, got a lot of fan support. But then there's some cases where you don't necessarily see it work out, where the fans call for certain people to be champ, and then it's like a month in, it starts to fail because the fans now aren't wanting what they got.
And it's weird. It's like, what metric are they going off of? Is it t-shirt sales? Is it ratings? Is it crowd reaction? Because, you know, what happens is they present a product that seems to be working against those metrics. You know, we're not cheering the loudest for Roman Reigns, but you keep putting him here in this position that is earned by the loudest reaction. It's a little, you know what I mean? There's like a weird disconnect, and it's like, I heard this shared in my school. I'm going to borrow it in the worst place to do so. But it's, stop listening to us and instead hear us. You know what I mean? It's two different verbs. You know, if Cross isn't getting the reaction, you've got to do two things. You either got to change the way you present Cross, or you got to change Cross and put somebody else in that position. Yeah.
And that's the thing where, you know, going with what you said about how it fails in some instances, it's like Cross is very unique in a sense, and if you change him too much, you're probably going to make people not like him even more, because what if you change him to a style that people don't like?
Here's a worthwhile question, Jack. Is Cross a heel or is he a face?
I couldn't tell you.
That's a really big question to answer off the get-go, because I can't either, and they don't know. They don't know, Jack, and here's how I know. They put him in a ring with both. Yeah. They didn't have a babyface to go after heel Cross, and they didn't have a heel to go after babyface Cross. What do? Put them all together. Fans won't even realize what we're hiding. Goodness gracious.
And, you know, it's why I really enjoyed his promo hyping up the match, and they played it a lot in that video package, which they honestly shouldn't have, because it kind of is exposing, like you said, kind of similar to when the Firefly Funhouse, and it was exposing a lot of things with John Cena, when Adam Cole said, and they even had each person saying it to him, they give Cross all the smoke and mirrors, they give him all the stuff, the entrance, I think Cole says they gave you this valet, they give you this special entrance, all the smoke and mirrors to make you feel special. But what they do to make Cole feel special is they ring the bell.
That was an absolutely incredible line. And guess what? Adam Cole got the biggest response of the five of them. It's hard to it's undisputed.
Yeah.
He's a guy who right? He's like the most authentic out there, I think.
Yeah. Kind of like how when you see like Kevin Owens get a lot of crowd support because like whenever he cuts a promo, it doesn't feel like he's doing something scripted or not. It feels very authentic coming from him.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
like
the guy who like kind of believes what he's doing.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, you know, going back to the thing about what do you do with Cross, you know, so many people.
Another important, like, I think one thing Kevin Owens does really well, and this is probably why people like Adam Cole so much, is people do want to project themselves onto the wrestler that they follow. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Kevin Owens is a normal guy like you and me. You know who's not a normal guy like you and me? Karrion Kross.
Yeah.
Gargano, kinda. Dunn, kinda. O'Reilly, I want as far away from me as possible. But yeah, like Karrion Kross, like, you know, Drew McIntyre is another guy on Raw that I think they want to pretend like is a normal guy like you and me, going up against those suits, Bobby Lashley and MVP. No, I'm going to win this for the little guy, like Mel Gibson did in Braveheart. I'm sorry, sir, you are not a little guy. You're 7 feet tall. You're an Adonis, a Scottish Adonis.
Yeah.
Stop acting like one of the boys.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing, you know. It was something we discussed so much last year, was, you know, when handling Drew, you know, as this like somewhat pure white meat babyface, is that you didn't want to get to the point where it was like an over push thing and people were gonna get tired of him. And that's what we're kind of seeing now, because when Drew started off, he had a ton of fan support. People were behind him. And, you know, he seemed like that authentic guy. But now, because of the way they've done things recently, it's kind of tough to get behind him as that authentic guy.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when it comes to Cross, it's like it's hard to get him off as authentic. And as I mentioned, you know, some people were just saying, oh, the main solution you can handle is just send him up to the main roster, because that's the main thing I've said, and I've seen a lot of people say, is he fits that main roster style of wrestling and character work more than NXT does. But the thing that people don't realize is you don't get called up to that main roster unless you get the attention of the main guys up there.
Yeah. If he doesn't have any attention in NXT, well, what good is he going to have on, you know, the flagship shows?
Yeah, and Triple H said it, I think, like last year, what's it called, when people were asking him, oh, well, why did you guys let Keith Lee get called up so soon if he had just won your main title? And he said it. He has no control over that. It's whether if the people up top want him, then the only thing he can negotiate with them is the time frame of when they get called up. You know, he won't let them call up a guy if they have stuff prepared, or he can't necessarily say no to certain people getting called up. But you know, he can decide when, if that makes sense. Like, because it's all
that age-old kind of mantra. It's not if, it's when. So he has no control of it. He has some control over when.
Yeah, like, and another thing he mentioned was that, you know, they'll at least give them notice when they're gonna call someone up. So, you know, that gives them time to prepare in the coming months, what to do with them, and then how to prepare their exit on the way out. Because one thing NXT does a lot is they'll give, usually, especially a lot of the guys that were built up a ton, they'll give them like a send-off.
Yeah.
And so it's like, people got to realize, you know, unless, you know, Vince and like Bruce Pritchard come up to Triple H and say, hey, we want to call up Cross, can you start preparing for him to leave NXT and get called up? He can't just say, oh, Vince and Bruce, take Cross up to the main roster since the NXT people aren't liking him. He can't do that. And that's why, like, so many fans think, like I agree and disagree with a lot of what Triple H was saying in different media calls. Because it's like, in a sense, fans think things are easier said than done. But at the same time, you shouldn't necessarily be telling your hardcore fan base and even your casual fan base, the ones that you're trying to pander to the most, to just not watch. Because then what are you going to do when they do stop watching?
Yeah, and really, what's the point of media calls if you're going to be that flustered over really, easy questions that are to be asked? Like, if you didn't want us to ask, don't show up to these press conferences or these media calls.
Yeah, and it's a thing on like both sides. Like the one that got a kick out of me the most was when Triple H simply just said he thinks NXT and stuff has the best like women's roster, and like you see like a ton of people getting all riled up over it, and it was just like, he's a businessman. Of course he's gonna say his roster's the best. What do you expect him to say? Oh no, there's better ones out there. Why would that make more people want to tune into your show if you're not saying that, But so many people were getting mad at him for it. It was like, anybody does that,
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if a team is bad, like let's say in the NBA or NFL, even if a team is bad, the coach will at least say something like, we have a ton of potential, we have the talent, we just need to work to get it right, No team is going to outright, unless like they're expecting to get fired or something, say this team is terrible, these guys are terrible.
You know what, it's true. He's doing what he's got to do in the role that he has. People are getting upset about the wrong thing, right? They shouldn't be upset at his declaration that the greatest women wrestlers in the world work for WWE. I think the line that irked people the most was, if they don't, they want to work for the WWE.
Yeah,
like that's a real braggadocious sentiment that isn't necessarily true. But what people should be more upset about is the way he completely worked around the question. And it's clearer through his non-answer that the WWE are not going to be a part of that NWA all-women's pay-per-view. They said, hey, come one, come all, even if you're under contract, let's try to work something out. Triple H said without saying it, we're not going to work something out. So there's a lot of people that you kind of want to see in that show who aren't going to be a part of it because reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can understand, like, a lot of things, like, you got to worry about injuries and stuff, but, like, it baffles me how unwilling they are to work with other companies when, like, places like New Japan have greatly shown the benefits over the year of allowing your talent, New Japan, what they have are excursions. To the listeners, they have excursions where, when they're training these guys, they'll send them out to other parts of the world, like the United States, Mexico, England, to train and learn new styles, to really master their work. And they'll allow them to work for other companies, to start working with different styles of wrestlers, different promotions, different crowds, to get that experience, and it's like, when you see benefits like that, it kind of makes you wonder, well, hey, if we got guys that we don't know what to do with, why not just send them out to these places to get exposure, get experience?
How much time we got in this episode, Jack?
6 minutes.
Oh, here's one last thought that you just reminded me, talking about people that they don't have plans for. Here's something else that should irk people more than it does. People who just sort of get hung up on the surface level. This is what he said. He said that the best women wrestlers in the world work for WWE. It's a hard pill to swallow to hear him say that when they released about 6 of them in the span of the last 4 weeks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your women's division is probably at its weakest that it's been in a while.
Yeah. Like, at least NXT has a lot of women that, they've done, like, giving them storylines and TV time.
Yeah.
But when you look at the main roster...
case in point, last night we had 4 women... we had 4 women in prominent matches with significant stories, and we had even more, like Candice and Indy, who aren't, but they could be,
Yeah. Yeah, and when you see the main roster and, like, they're not only their women's scene, but their tag scene, and you see the cuts that have happened, it's just like, how can you not find time for a lot of these talents? Like, the main thing I give credit to, like, AEW and, like, Impact or Impact's kind of struggling right now because they need to make some new signings. But New Japan as well. What they do is they do a lot of rotation with their shows and their roster so that you aren't just seeing the same old people on every show, you know? Whereas WWE, very much the opposite. You're very much inclined to tune in each week and see the same old people.
Speaking of same old people, same old thing, Jack, are we going to do this again next week? Because next Sunday is WWE Hell in the Cell. Drew McIntyre versus Bobby Lashley for the 7th time.
Yeah. And tying in, it wasn't just women released. We saw a lot of talented male wrestlers released as well. And it's just like, in a time that you desperately need new faces, this is what you're going to do?
Jeez Louise.
Yeah.
What do you say, Jack? Are we recording next week?
I am down to record next week unless something happens. Like, when I saw the releases of, like, Strowman, Aleister Black, and Murphy, I even told Dom, because he was, like, shocked by it, and as an outsider, you know, he was just like, how are people allowing them to continue getting away with a lot of this and stuff? Mm-hmm. I literally told Dom, like, I'm waiting it out. As always, I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, especially because, you know, the main thing people know, I love NXT and I love a lot of the guys on the main roster. I solely tune in. I solely give WWE my dollars because I want to support those guys, you know? Mm-hmm. Like my dad always says, you know, he doesn't want to see these guys lose their jobs and stuff. And it was the main thing I emphasized to Dom with these recent releases was this class of releases was probably the most talented they've ever released, that so many people aren't worried about them finding work after their no complete clause is over, because they can find work anyway.
Tom Campbell of Cultaholic, of this recent class, it's funny to call it a class, it's sickening to call it a class of releases. He said that anybody could start a promotion with just the people that they let go.
Yeah. So, like, I just told Dom, like, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt because I want to continue supporting these guys. But if they make a couple of certain more moves, because, like, there was rumors of more releases happening, I was like, if there's a couple more that happen, I don't know, I may just solely have to reconsider taking my dollar somewhere else, because, you know, I've done everything to kind of show my disdain and not be a hypocrite about it. You know, I've stopped tuning into the weekly shows. I've not aside from maybe like recently, like for the longest time, I didn't buy into their other products like clothing and other designs and stuff like that. The main thing I would do is just, hey, I'm giving you my dollar because I want to watch your pay-per-views to support the talent, you know. But I'm down to do it next week, barring they don't do anything drastic in the coming week.
I'll tell you what, Jack, in a week, if they do something dirty, if they do us dirty, I'm happy to turn this podcast into the NWA review show. Hey, tell you what, there's plenty of places for us to go and seek this sort of, you know, scratch that we got an itch for. Yeah. You got New Japan, got AEW, you've got Ring of Honor, you've got Impact. I'll tell you what, man, if you make this decision, I may consider joining you.
Yeah. Yeah, right now we're just teetering that line because those recent releases really got me. But you know, as always, we'll keep this place updated, keep the listeners updated for anything that goes down. So with about a minute left, we'll close out here. I've been your host, Jack, joined by my guest,
Mr. Solis.
We want to thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rule 34 podcast. As always, if it exists, we have an opinion on it. Thank you, and we hope to see you in the next episode.